So if you haven't emailed your Chapter 35 questions, make sure you do sometime today. I will try to get to those second hour. But we're going to move on now to plants. So Chapter 36, today is probably might seem like review a little bit, hopefully. I don't know. Chapter 36, we're going to talk about plant form, so just basically plant structure. So a little bit of an overview of the plant body. Remember, our vascular plants are the ones that have roots and shoots. Sorry, it says roots and roots. It should be roots and shoots. And so our root system, the main purpose of it is to anchor the plants, get into that soil, absorb those nutrients and water and other ions critical for the plant to grow. And then also it's an extensive to live on lands. Because remember, we're trying, life started in the water and now we're trying to transition in onto land, so we have to overcome adaptations in dry climates. The shoot system consists of your stems and your leaves. You can kind of think of it as, your photosynthetic process. Oh, she's looking for that? I forgot it. She left it here.
May I have your attention for today's announcements? The blood drive is May 4th.
Okay. Flowers are also considered part of the shoot system. Pause, it's up here.
Yeah, can I use your charger?
It's my charger.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, so shoot system continued. A lot of times we have a repeating unit of this vegetative shoot. So we'll go inner node to node, then you'll see a leaf branch out with auxiliary buds on there. Then I'll go inner node, node, leaf, and so on and so forth. But this does not apply to the reproductive structures of the plant. Okay, when we look at roots and shoots, they're composed of 3 types of tissue. So these are the 3 types of tissue: dermal, ground, vascular tissue. Our dermal, when you take a look at that word dermal, think epidermis or outer layer. It's very thick in most plants because there's a layer of cuticle on there to help reduce water loss as well as ultraviolet damage. Again, those are 2 key adaptations in order for a plant to survive on land. And so when you cut a plant cross-section wise, you can see that all 3 of these tissue systems are evident. The dermal tissue is peach color, the ground tissue is the green color, and then your vascular tissue is the purple. The ground tissue includes the fibers that serve in storage of nutrients and water, as well as where photosynthesis takes place, and in some cases secretion, so maybe like secretion of resin or some kind of other types of chemicals to keep insects off of it. And then finally your vascular tissue is where fluids and dissolved substances are transported. So it includes your xylem and your phloem. Remember, phloems kind of sounds like F for food, so that's the sugar, and xylem is water with dissolved minerals in it. Okay, meristems are kind of like stem cells for plants. They will build the plant, the entire body plan of it. So they're clumps of small cells. They have a large nuclei, and like I said, they are kind of like the plant's stem cells. And so when one cell divides, it gives rise to 2 cells, and one remains meristemic. So one remains as a stem cell, but the other one undergoes differentiation to produce all the 3 different types of tissues and specialized cells that plants have. But there are 2 types of meristems. The first one's called the apical meristem, which means it's at the points of the roots and the shoots. Gosh, roots and shoots. These tissues continually divide and add more cells to the tips. And so any tissue derived from apical meristems are called primary tissues. And so this is where plants elongate and extend out, is from these apical meristems.
So usually at the top?
Yep, usually at the top of the plant or the tips of the roots. That's where you find these guys. So maybe if you want to think maybe like vertical, I don't know, vertical elongation or extension. So here's some pictures. This is the apical meristem, and you can see how it's just densely packed with cells, just undergoing division. So again, apical meristem, the tip of the top here. If we look at the roots, this would be the apical meristem.
Do they grow constantly, or do they kind of?
Yep, continually divide. Yep.
So the roots are constantly growing down.
Mm-hmm. Both the roots and the shoots. Why do I say that? Roots and shoots are surrounded by tissues for added protection. So here's my apical meristem, and it's protected by these 2 leaf perimodiums. Okay, the root meristem is protected by a root cap, and we're going to talk more about the process of what this root cap actually does in a later slide.
What's the What's all the like blank on the right picture? What's all the white or not
Right
white,
here?
but blank? Yeah. No, to the right of that. No,
Right.
to the right.
Sorry. Right.
Yeah.
This.
No. Up.
This. Up.
To the left a little.
Eh?
Just the blank.
It's
Yeah.
just it's nothing. It's just empty
Right,
space.
Just empty space.
Yep. This is the top of the plant cut this way.
All right.
Okay. Yes.
I had to know.
The root cap, I should also say, so like as the root is penetrating through the soil, these cells get sloughed off, kind of scraped off through abrasion. Sometimes these cells do secrete mucus, so they can kind of worm their way through the soil.
Nice.
But the apical meristem gives rise to those three tissue systems. And so these are, kind of like before it turns into the three tissues, this is like the step before that. So we have the protoderm, which forms our epidermis, Procambium, which produces our primary vascular tissues for transport, and then we have the ground meristem that just differentiates into more different types of ground tissue. And so here's, I really like this diagram where it's got the apical meristem at the top, and then it gives rise to primary meristems like your protoderm, ground meristem, and procambium, and you can kind of see that in here: epidermis, ground tissue, vascular tissue. So, okay, there are another type of like stem cells. So we have this vertical elongation or extension with the roots and the shoots. Now we also have lateral meristems. So they will increase the root and shoot in diameter, or horizontally, if you want to think of it as that way. So we have primary growth, which is like our herbaceous plant. We have secondary growth with the woody stems, so think trees, like, any type of bark plant. Yeah, so we call these secondary tissues or secondary plant body. All right. So there's a couple of dramatic changes with woody plants in their two lateral meristems. We have the cork cambium, which is the bark, and then the vascular cambium, which is right underneath the bark, and it helps produce secondary vascular tissue like a secondary xylem and a secondary phloem. So the secondary xylem is kind of like your main component of wood, and then your secondary phloem is close to that outer surface of the wood. So if you damage this part, the tree will most likely die. If you cut down trees, you can put chemicals on it, but I always like to use salt because it's a little bit safer than putting actual chemicals onto it and a little bit more green. But
is that people like strip the bark around it and then you put salt in there?
Yep.
And what would that do? Just clog up the phylum?
Well, it just like the cells die. Yeah, they basically dry out and then it's dead. Okay, moving on to plant tissues. So we already discussed these three, but like I said, we're going to go a little bit more in depth. It's color-coded blue, green, and red. But remember, our dermal tissue is that epidermis, that protective function. The ground tissue, there's lots of different functions like photosynthesis, storage, and structural support. And then finally, that vascular tissue transports water and nutrients throughout the plants. So these are the three that we're going to go into depth here. So the first one's the dermal tissue, again, protective. And there's like two parts to the dermal tissue. Your epidermis, which is a one cell layer thick, and it's the outer covering of the plants. And then on top of that, we kind of have this fatty cutin layer that makes the cuticle. And the cuticle is very waxy. It's made mostly of lipids, so that way when water hits the surface, it kind of runs down, and so the cells they don't explode or get turgid. They'll go somewhere else down to the roots where they can get absorbed safely and all that. No, like again, it also prevents drying out. Okay. So the epidermal cells, remember they come from the protoderm, cover all parts of that primary plant body. So we have guard cells, which make up your stoma, which make up your stomata. So they're sausage-shaped cells. This is where chloroplast is usually contained. We have trichomes. They look like tiny little hairs. If you remember from your ant fungi, you were supposed to Google a picture of a trichome and paste it on there. Those are trichomes, like hairs, tiny little hairs on a plant, and it keeps the leaf cool and reduces water loss. And then finally we have root hairs, so tiny little hairs on the roots that help absorb water and minerals, so it increases surface area. Okay, so here I have a pair of guard cells that open and close, and they're based on turgid pressures inside the cell. Here you can see a trichome and a trichome, and there's another trichome. And then here we have some root hairs at the bottom here to increase surface area and absorption. Okay, Ground tissue, like I said, many functions, but it's made of 3 types of cells, parenchyma cells, and their main function is storage. And then the other 2 types of cells, collenchyma and sclerenchyma, provide protection and support. And so where are these in a cross-section of a plant? Well, there's sclerenchyma right there. So right there, they're fiber cells. I'm not seeing any of the other words on there. Okay. We'll start with parenchyma. This is the most common type found in all cells. Like I said, storage, so large vacuoles. These cells can live for many years. They'll store water, store food. They help in photosynthesis as well as secretion. And so with secretion, nectar could be released, resin could be released, latex could be stored, other metabolic waste and proteins. Majority of fruits like apples are basically just parenchyma cells. So you're eating parenchyma cells when you eat an apple. Collenchyma, living protoplasts that can live for many years. So the shape of it is a little longer and longer than wide, so they're skinny. You want to make skinny and elongated. Their cell walls can vary in thickness, but they're a little bit flexible, so they can bend but not break. And they help provide support for stems in a primary plant body. So collenchyma support. I'm pretty sure the collenchyma, like in celery, is the strings that you can peel out.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty positive that's collenchyma. Okay. They're closer to the sun than they are. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Sclerenchyma, tough, thick walls. They have lignin in them. And there's kind of like 2 types of fibers in sclerenchyma, fibers in scalarids. In pears, that gritty texture when you eat pears, that's scalarids. You're actually eating sclerenchyma cells, so that gritty texture. So I don't know, I've actually kind of acquired a taste the last couple of years.
The pears that we have here are so different than an actual pear, though.
Yeah.
I like peaches.
Okay, so this is just a slide depicting a nice little summary of the 3 types of ground tissue cells that we were looking at. So, yeah. Okay, moving on to vascular tissue with water and nutrient transportation. So we have xylem, which moves water, but it can also contain dissolved minerals in it.
I know you can't just click where you want the box to be.
There are 2 types of xylem vessels, if you want to think of it as that way. So we have like vessels, continuous tubes, they're hollow, cylindrical, arranged end to end, and water moves through it. And then we have trichids, which are dead cells that taper at the ends and they overlap each other. So they both serve as water transportation, but their structure's a little bit different. I hope I have a picture on the next slide. Excellent, okay. So these would be vessels, and then these would be trichids. And you can see with the vessels that they're tapered, okay, onto it. With the trichids, they're a little bit more elongated. No, I don't have a picture of, yes, okay, sorry, yes, a little bit more elongated. Phloem moves food, sugars. There are 2 types of cells in phloem, sieve cells, and then sieve tube members. Now, sieve cells, we find them in seedless vascular and gymnosperms, and then in our flower plants, their cells are sieve tube members. So a little bit of evolution here, or changes. Now, with the sieve tube members, they do require companion cells to help carry out functions to maintain that cell, and yeah, so just a little bit more complicated within the angiosperms.
Do you have a homework on this?
I don't think so.
Based.
No.
And is that other homework due today?
Yes.
Okay, so email it.
All right, so here's the sieve tube elements, and here's just the sieve with just the simple plates in the middle here. But here with this one, you can kind of see the plasmodesmata and companion cells associated with it. Again, sieve plates, a little bit with that companion cell that helps regulate that cell. Okay, moving on to roots. Main function, anchor, and absorption. So there are 4 regions that we're going to look at in our roots: the root cap, the zone of cell division, the zone of elongation, and then the zone of maturation. Do you have to type anything here?
Nope.
Excellent. Okay, so a little picture depicting where we're going to be looking at here. Here's the root cap. It's orange color. And then remember that is where the root meristem is basically. We have a zone of division. So remember when we looked at onion cells, onion root tip cells, we wanted to look towards the end because that's where we were going to find all the cells in the different stages of mitosis. Then we have this elongation phase, and then finally maturity up here. So the root cap is made of 2 types of cells: inner columella cells and then your lateral root cap cells. So these guys look like columns. These guys are always being replenished by the apical root meristems. But their main function is to protect those delicate tissues behind it through that abrasive soil. So like I said, they will secrete some kind of mucus lubricant to the outside. Their lifespan's really, really short because of abrasion and damage. But it also aids in perception of gravity, so a plant knows what is up and what is down. Zone of division, cell division here, also protected by, is protected by the root cap. These cells are a little bit cuboidal, so cube-like. Small vacuoles, large nuclei, rapidly divided into those 3 primary tissues: protoderm, procambium, and the ground meristem. And then the zone of elongation, where the roots lengthen and they become longer than they are wide. So before they were tiny little cubes, and now they're stretching out into, I don't know, rectangles, if you want to think of it as that way. But now the small vacuoles that were in those cuboidal cells have now occupied 90% volume of the cell. Yeah. All right, so there's no further increase after the elongation, and it's kind of like the first part of maturity. And then finally we have that maturity zone, where they're either going to mature into epidermal cells like thin cuticle, or maybe they're going to differentiate into the cortex, or maybe some kind of endodermis cell. So it's going to differentiate into the different cell types. Okay, now I wanted to point out this Casparian strip here is made of suberin, which is a fatty substance. So remember, lipids kind of repel water. And sometimes you'll see it in cross sections of branches and one, that this Casparian strip that blocks water transport between certain cell types. And I hope I have a diagram on the next slide to depict this. Yes, I do. Excellent. Okay, so here's a cross section of the root here. And here we have our endodermis with the cortex. And if we zoom in on this, you see these cells are layered with red here. Well, that's that suberin molecule forming that Casparian strip. So, water is pushed in a different direction, we'll say.
So why do they want to stop the transport between the cells?
Well, I think it has to do a lot with the function of it. Like we're in the roots, so the main function is to absorb water and then move it elsewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we also have different modified roots. So we have prop roots, which you kind of find in corn. I saw one yesterday on the track.
Really?
Yeah. Thick, advantageous roots. Help brace the plant against the wind. We have aerial roots.
They're hard to pull it down.
Because sometimes there are plants that grow on trees, so they're not in the ground. They need a way to get air and other substances. Nematophores, so plants that grow in swamp lakes. Basically, it's like a snorkel. So there's a little air tube here, so they can get CO2 and release oxygen. No, they're not sharp.
Oh.
They just look
Are
sharp.
they gonna? Speaking of the track, are they gonna blow it off? Blow the meat, like all the stuff off of it, or is that just today? The junior high one.
No, I think they're just gonna leave it.
No. Gonna have practice.
You have to work it.
We have practice
You're gonna have to work it.
at the meet.
If we have a meet. If there's no meet, it's gonna be a mock meet. I hope your dad still sets up the camera. I think Taber's gonna express that to him. Okay, now I'm just recorded that in the lecture. Okay, contractile roots. Roots contract to pull plant a little bit deeper each year, so you can kind of think of it as a corkscrew, so you can kind of see that going on here. We have parasitic roots, roots that grow into plants and steal nutrients. We have food storage roots, like sweet potatoes, tubers. They are made of parenchyma cells. We have water storage roots, pumpkin family, think of that. And then we have buttress roots, which I depicted here. Huge roots towards the base of a trunk, provide stability, so fig and tropical trees. So lots of modified roots. Moving on to stems, support for above ground organs. So if we look at the external stem structure, we have a apical meristem at the top, and it produces the primordia, which can turn into your leaves, shoots, or flowers. I said it again.
Shoots.
Yes, shoots. Leaves, shoots, or flowers. Remember, we've already discussed the node, where leaf attachment happens at the stem. We have an internode, which is the area between nodes, and then we have an axil, which is the angle of the leaf's petiole or blade and stem, and an auxiliary bud, which is a product of your primary shoot apical meristem. There is a difference between monocots and dicots with the internal stem structure, and we saw this a little bit with the angiosperms. You had like a section, this is monocot or dicot. But monocots, their vascular bundles are scattered, and there's no secondary growth. But with dicots, their vascular bundles are arranged in a ring, and they do have secondary growth. So diagram showing your monocots. Other features of monocots, their veins are parallel. So you see this with corn. Here's those vascular bundles that are scattered. Their flower parts are in multiples of 3. In dicots, we have 2 cotyledons, which are these tiny little leaves here that help protect the apical meristem. Broad leaf with veins. Their vascular bundles are arranged in a ring, and the multiples of 5 or 4. We do have modified stems. Bulbs, believe it or not, are underground stems. They're swollen. Yeah, so like onions, if you want to think of it that way. Corms, yes, resemble bulbs, but they have no fleshy leaves with adventagous roots below. And then we have rhizomes, which we have discussed, horizontal stems that grow underground.
So like carrots.
Horizontal roots that
I
grow.
guess that wouldn't be horizontal.
No, it'd be more like related to fungi, just like tiny little stems.
What's that huge fungi again that spread out like over a mile? Not fungi, it's probably like organs.
It's like that picture. It's the picture over
Of
head
like
of all
orange,
the
or
just
like,
covered in
it's like
orange.
yellow. Or...
Oh, I don't know what it's called. They're huge.
That's crazy.
Other types of modified stems, runners and stolons. You see this a lot with strawberries. So strawberries have horizontal stems, and then they help produce a new strawberry plant. I just planted my raspberries last night, so hopefully they take off. Tubers. Carbohydrates accumulate at the tips. They swell to become tubes. So tubers are sweet potatoes. We have tendrils. Where do we find tendrils? Does anyone remember?
Tendrils.
Sounds familiar.
Pea plants, yes, pea plants, the tiny little things that coil around and they kind of pull the plants up to the sun. And then we have cladophylls, flattened photosynthetic stems like cacti. Spines are leaves as well. So, picture of modified stems. There's your corm, there's your runners, your rhizomes, more rhizomes, and then your tuber.
What's the main function of the spines on a cactus?
Protection, because they store water inside.
Makes sense.
Well, those animals are just...
Okay, I think the last thing that I want to discuss are leaves, which is our photosynthetic organs. So they are initiated by the primordia. So they come from primordia. They are where photosynthesis takes place. They expand by enlargements and cell division, but then once they reach maturity, they don't grow any larger. There are lots of different features. I mean, how are leaves arranged? You know, are they compound? Are they simple? How do they form? You know, are they alternated or parallel? Different sizes. There are internal structure could be set up differently as well. So lots of different features. So let's just start with the external leaf structure. We can look at 2 morphological groups. So like whenever you see the word PHYLL, that's talking about a leaf. So you have microphyll and megaphyll. Microphyll means that we just have one vein branch in from the vascular cylinder. And we have megaphylls, which means several to many veins. There are different types of leaf forms, simple leaves and compound leaves. So simple leaves means the blades are undivided. They may have teeth, or there may be lobed-like, and I'm not seeing a teeth, but this would be kind of lobed-like here. We have compound leaves. These are compound leaves. Right here, this is also a compound. This is a double compound leaf. We can have pinnately compounds, so they are arranged in pairs. This would be pinnately, and this would be palmately. Yes. Leaf anatomy, when we look at the cross-section of a leaf. Here's that upper epidermis covered by that cutin. And then you can see we have a mesophyll cell layer. There's that vascular tissue, and we have a spongy mesophyll. And a lower epidermis with the stoma. Again, covered by cutin. The internal part of the leaf structure helps regulate gas exchange and evaporation. So remember, we have that epidermis with the cuticle, and there's no chloroplast there. You may see trichomes on it. The stomata are always on the underside of a leaf near the lower epidermis, always underneath the leaf. And then in between the upper and lower epidermis is the mesophyll, so the middle part of the leaf. And like I said, there's two types of mesophyll, palisade and then spongy. And so the palisade part is where photosynthesis actually takes place. Spongy is more for gas exchange and passage of water vapor. So I'm just going to go back a slide, show you this. So you can see all the tiny little chloroplast in there. This is the photosynthesis part, and that makes sense. It's towards the top of the leaf. That's where the sunlight's going to be. And then the lower epidermis is where gas exchange takes place. This is where CO2 comes in and travels to here, and then oxygen is released. Okay. We also have modified leaves as well. So sometimes floral leaves, we call them bracts, surround the true flowers. What's the Christmas flower called? Yes, those are actually modified leaves. Yeah, they're red. Yes.
What? So mistletoe?
No, not the mistletoe.
Oh.
Poinsettia. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I heard that. We have spines. They are also modified leaves. We have reproductive leaves, like the walking fern. So that's kind of cool. Window leaves are leaves that have holes through them, and you may have seen that in tropical areas. We have shade leaves. They are thinner with less mesophyll. Shade leaves are usually located towards the bottom of the plant, or the bottom of a tree, I should say. And then obviously we have some leaves that can trap insects, so insectivorous leaves. So pitcher plants, where their leaf is literally cone-shaped, and then they have their digestive enzymes underneath it, or maybe rainwater will accumulate there, and when the insect comes in, it falls in, it drowns, and then boom, it gets nitrogen. Venus flytrap also hits a sensor. After 20 seconds, if it hits another sensor, then it will close on it. And I think, hold on here, I thought I had some videos of this.